So welcome to our webinar this afternoon, talking about grantee evaluation and reporting. My name is Sarah Lambertson. I'm the National Technical Assistance Manager with New Entry Sustainable Farming Project, and I'm here with my colleague.
Hello, this is Kristen Aldrich. I'm the National Technical Assistance Coordinator.
All right. So we're going to do a quick technical overview. All right, so we're going to talk just very briefly about New Entry, give a little bit of background on the indicators of success, and then I'm going to review the common metrics that we use in indicators of success, and then Kristen is going to talk about the USDA's REEport system. So New Entry, we are a nonprofit based in Massachusetts. We do beginning farmer work. We have an incubator farm in Massachusetts, as well as a food hub and CSA and a farmland matching program. And our national team provides training and technical assistance nationally to food systems organizations. Specifically for this work, we have a training and technical assistance grant from the USDA Community Food Projects Grant Program. So we have funding specifically to support applicants and grantees of CFP. So webinars such as this one, as well as a lot of other webinars that we have on our website, as well as future webinars are all part of that. We also provide one-on-one support. Perhaps some of you as applicants receive that. We also offer that to grantees up to 5 hours per year for free. So if you have things that you want to talk about with us or our network of technical assistance providers, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to connect you. We also have various materials and resources on our website, and as I mentioned, webinars. So the indicators of success. This is a report that New Entry has been putting together since the fiscal year 2014. So right now we're collecting data for our third report, the fiscal year 2016 report. But we built this off of the work of the Community Food Security Coalition. They put this report together from about 2004 until 2011. And they used the whole measures for community food systems. And you'll see as I go through, there are 6 different categories that the data fits in, and I'll go through those categories as we're going through. But we built our report based off of the Community Food Security Coalition's report using their structure and using their process. And they had the training and technical assistance grant prior to us, so we're really building on their work. This report, we send it to the USDA. And the USDA uses data from it for congressional reporting. So it's really important, not only is it required, but it's also important to help with future funding for this program, which is obviously important to all of us. So it is required reporting for all grantees on an annual basis. This webinar today is geared towards new grantees, though I know there may be some grantees not in their first year as well here. So if you're in your first year, you are not required to submit anything this year, since we always do this for the prior year. But if you are in your second or later year, the data is due January 20th, but hopefully that's not news to you. If you're in your first year, data for this won't be due to us until next January or so. And we will have our report available in the spring of 2017 for this year and following spring for the next year. It consists of both an organizational survey as well as a beneficiary survey. The organizational survey and beneficiary surveys are available online. For the beneficiary survey, that is something that we appreciate you sending out to the people that benefit from your project, but we're very flexible in the way that happens, whether that's, you know, I know a lot of people already conduct evaluation of their beneficiaries, so we are happy to fit this into however you already do it. If you do interviews, if you are able to ask some of our questions, if you, you know, however you do it, we're appreciative of getting the data in a variety of different ways. So that's something that I'm more than happy to talk with you about at any point leading up to the next several months, so that you can plan appropriately to fit the questions in. The organizational survey, really the only way to do it is online, and I can send out a link to the survey if folks want to take a look at it, but I also have a survey guide that I sent out in the email this morning. That's probably the best way to look at it. That is for the current year, those questions. There may be some questions for the survey next year, though I don't anticipate major changes. So that would be a good place to look at what it is that we're looking for. But I'm going to talk now about the metrics under each category. All right, so the first category is healthy people. So the main categories that we look at here, we're looking at the populations involved in the different projects. So that's talking both about demographics as well as ages, as farmers and youth, and sort of really trying to just get a really comprehensive understanding of who it is that's involved in these projects. We're also trying to get a sense of the total number of people as well as the breakdown by different categories. So we're looking at beneficiaries both in terms of direct beneficiaries, and we classify that as people who either directly receive training from you or are a customer of your program, something where you specifically know who that person is. You could provide demographic information. It's not just a number, but you actually know who that person is. As opposed to indirect beneficiaries, if you run, say, a farmer's market, you may not know who all the customers are at the market, but you know roughly how many people are coming to the market on a weekly basis. So that's just an example of how we differentiate between direct and indirect beneficiaries. We just want to get an understanding of, what the larger scope is, as well as any specifics that we can. CFP is very interested in the connection to federal assistance programs, so we try to get an understanding of the connection that your project has to programs such as SNAP and WIC, and trying to really understand what your program is doing to impact use of these, if you're doing this in any way. And one thing that I should mention is that since CFP projects vary so widely by the work that they're doing, there are going to be a lot of things here that may not be relevant to you. If you're not working with federal assistance programs, that's fine. And that question you don't need to answer that question in the survey if it's not relevant to you. And then these last two, change in fruit and vegetable consumption and ease of access to fresh food, are both ones that come from our beneficiary survey, trying to get a sense of how people are impacted by the work that you're doing. So this is just showing you the before snapshot for healthy food, fresh fruit and vegetable consumption before starting their CFP project, and then after. So you can see that there's a pretty dramatic increase of the more than once a day and 4 to 6 times a week, which is great to see, obviously. So for strong communities, with this, we're really trying to get a sense of, some of these things are obviously hard to really capture numerically, but as best we can, we're trying to quantify the level of engagement within the community and the connection within the community. So the first is organizational partnerships, including new partnerships that you have, as well as volunteer hours and number of volunteers. And both of those are really just trying to sort of get a sense of the scope and scale of your connection with your community. And then looking at new and enhanced leadership roles, and that's not only just leadership roles, but also looking at the demographics of the people in those leadership roles, as well as looking at community food assessments and food policy councils. So this is just showing you, again, this is from the fiscal year 2015 report, looking at the new leadership roles created by all CFP grantees in that year. And you can see just a little over half were people of color, just a little under half were youth, and then women were just under a third. The next category is thriving local economies. So in this one, we've got jobs created. Well, there's a whole bunch there. Businesses started, business plans. Again, just really trying to get a sense of what is the scope and impact in terms of the local economy that your project is having. The economic impact activities, those vary from courses on business planning to supporting entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of different activities that a variety of projects take place. And food bought, sold, and distributed. So really just trying to understand the amount of food that's moving through these projects in terms of dollar amount, in terms of pound, where they're going, so that we can really sort of start to demonstrate the scope of this across the country. As well as looking at the breakdown of the customers and the sales. And for projects that do have farmers markets, we do go into a bit of depth with farmers markets, looking at how frequently they're occurring, an estimate of how many people are attending them, the sales, and then also looking at farmer income and whether or not farmers are able to live off farming as their primary income. And this is showing the breakdown of sales by customer. So you can see the average sales per customer. Obviously, direct-to-consumer has the most customers by a long shot, but a much smaller sale per customer. And yeah. All right, and vibrant farms and gardens. Obviously, this is very core to CFP, and there are a lot of programs that have farming and gardening components. So again, here trying to get a sense of how much food is grown, what types of food are grown, how many acres, whether or not projects are operating on in an urban environment or not. And looking at community gardens, similarly to farmers markets, we go into a bit of depth here to understand a little bit about the community gardens in terms of number of gardeners, trying to get a sense of the scale there. And then for projects that are working directly with farmers, looking at the number of farmers, farms started, as well as land tenure situations. That's primarily for projects that are growing land themselves. Obviously, access to land, reliable land, is really challenging, and we want to sort of try to highlight and understand how CFP projects are doing in regards to that. So here are the demographics of the farmers in fiscal year 2015. And then sustainable ecosystems. So we want to understand both for projects that are working with farmers as well as projects that are growing land themselves. So we want to know not only how food is being grown now, but also if projects or farmers are changing their practices. Since that's, it's not just about what's happening now, but if you're having a positive impact on the farmers that you're working with, we'd really like to be able to demonstrate the change over time that's happened there. Compost is another metric that we're showing in terms of the ecosystem. So this is showing the growing practices by number of projects, both for food that's grown as well as purchased by CFP projects. So you can see that organic practice without a certification is one of the most common, but also a variety of other land management techniques that are going on for these different projects. And justice and fairness is the final category. So a couple of the ways we look at this, looking at materials for non-English speakers, number of socially disadvantaged farmers, leadership roles other than white, and food policy council members other than white. So that wraps up the common metrics for each of the different indicators that we look at. I'm going to hand it off to Kristen now, who's going to talk about REEport. And again, just to reiterate, so the Indicators of Success is a report that we at New Entry put together. So questions about that and I'll obviously answer questions about this after Kristen is done speaking, but longer term questions about it and connecting with us in terms of filling out the survey, that all comes directly through us. But Kristen's about to talk about REEport, which is a USDA system. And so she can tell you a little bit more about that, but we are not the ones who manage that system.
Great, thank you, Sarah. So yeah, just to reiterate, we're going to jump into the REEport system and take a closer look at that. So it might be redundant if you have accessed the system before. It might be old news or information, which is in some ways even better, to be more familiar with it, of course. So this is just going to be taking a look at the system, accessing it, and focusing primarily on the annual progress reports that will be due. There's also the financial report piece, which we'll touch on briefly, and the final report, which would be due, of course, after your grant closes. But again, for today, for this webinar, we're going to focus on the progress report. So just to give that URL again, this can be accessed through portal.nifa.usda.gov. And just a quick note on the browser compatibility, they do say that Mozilla Firefox or Internet Explorer are more compatible, optimal browsers as opposed to Google Chrome. It would be your project director or your authorized organization representative to be logging into the system and submitting your report. Those two users will have the proper accessibility to those and privileges to those areas of the reporting system to make sure that they can actually submit that report. Once you get into the REEport system, we'll look at this in a moment, but you'll click into your active applications. And then just to point out the due dates for your progress report, that would be due 90 calendar days after the anniversary of your project start date. And I should say within 90 calendar days. So it can, of course, be submitted earlier than that. And then the final technical report would be due 90 calendar days after the grant end date. So again, this is kind of jumping into the system and taking a look at the layout here. So here you can see where you would click onto your project under the active applications section. And then there's a couple different ways where you can access your report. You can see the menu navigation bar at the top of the screen, but then they also have these icons in this kind of graphic form here where you can access your progress report. And so once you click into your progress report, you'll see a list of your projects here. If you have more than one, you might see more than one under here, but it would likely be your one project. And then you can click into it in order to see the draft of your report or submitted reports. This first page of your progress report is the cover page, and this is actually pre-populated with information from your project, the project initiation report. So that was completed, that should have already been completed at this point for all current grantees. Once you were awarded the grant, then you should have submitted your project initiation, just kind of collecting some basic information about your project into the system. And so at any rate, this cover page will be pre-populated with a lot of that information. So next is your participants. Again, there's some pre-populated information here. Your project director and co-PD are pre-populated. And here you would just complete the actual FTE for project staff. So any actual time completed during the reporting period. In the case of using student workers, you would enter the number of students that worked on the project with the corresponding classification of instructional programs code needed in this section. The next piece is the target audience. And so here, for the purposes of your progress report, you're only going to include information about the target audience reached during your reporting time period. So that may very well be a subset of the total target audience that you plan to reach. But again, you just want to reflect what happened over the reporting period. The next page is about products. So here where they're referring to products, this only means publications, patents, and applications for plant variety protection. So it's pretty specific when they're talking about products on this particular screen. And then it'll be the next screen called Other Products, where you would enter anything such as newsletters, workshops, web pages, etc. So to take a look at other products and what that could mean, I've just given some examples here. So this could be activities, which could include conducting or analyzing experiments or surveys, assessments, facilitating, teaching, or mentoring, any events that you may have conducted, from workshops to field days to conferences, any services, including consulting or tutoring. And then products here, they're defining as this kind of extensive list, but that could include audio or video products, curriculum, data or databases, software, websites with their corresponding URL, information, skills, and technology for individuals, communities, and programs. So kind of an extensive list, more of a catch-all under the other products area as opposed to the products previous section. And here on the accomplishments page, another area that will be pre-populated is the major goals of the project. So you'll find that's already filled out for you. Then for the subsequent questions in this section, there is that 8,000 character limit. So just be aware of that as you're going through the section and filling things out here. But the other questions that will be asked are, what was accomplished under these goals? What opportunities for training and professional development has the project provided? How have the results been disseminated to communities of interest? And what do you plan to do during the next reporting period to accomplish the goals? And the final section here are changes or problems. So this is an area where you can discuss anything that has changed over the course of the reporting period. You should always be aware to connect with your grant administrator if there are any major changes that do occur during your reporting period. It's always important to communicate that and make sure that you're going through the proper channels if anything is changing in your objectives or something along those lines. So make sure to stay communicative with your grant administrator, but for the purposes of the progress report, this is where you would be entering that information. And so when you are ready to submit your report, you'll of course click submit on your menu bar. You'll see a message on your screen that it has been submitted, and you'll receive an email confirmation with your report attached. And so if there are any questions or if NIFA is requiring additional information, you should hear from them within 90 days after you have submitted your report. And I just wanted to briefly talk about the financial report piece as well. So there are two pieces of the financial report. One is the SF425 financial form, and this will be due every year 90 days after the anniversary of the award or the project start date. And you would email that to NIFA at the address listed here. And there's also a financial report piece in the REEport system, and that will be due annually on February 1st every year. But I also wanted to point out it's important to review your award terms and conditions, which you should have received when the award was granted, in addition to your award face sheet, which will have more specific information about your project. And those are really important resources to be checking back to if you do have questions about reporting requirements for your project. And so I wanted to make sure I linked here to where you can find the SF425 form and the instructions for it. So this is a screenshot of NIFA's SF425 page where you can, again, download those instructions and the form itself for that financial submission. And I also wanted to point you to those general terms and conditions for your grant. Again, this is a really important resource to make sure you're looking back to if you do have any questions. It's really comprehensive about many aspects of your award, but certainly does go into detail about the requirements for reporting, including financial reporting, and your final report. So when in doubt, you can always refer to this resource. And again, of course, also contact your grant administrator for any additional questions.
All right, so at this time, we will take any questions that you have about either indicators of success or REEport. Question coming in, I was wondering how to figure out who my grant administrator is. That should be on your award face sheet, which you received when the grant was finalized. If you are not able to find it on there, the person that you can contact who should hopefully be able to help you is Jane Clary. She's the overall program director. And I should say that for programmatic changes, you know, objective changes, things like that, Jane Clary is the person who you should connect with. But if you have budgetary questions or changes or things like that, it should be someone in the awards management division, and that person should be on your award face sheet. On the financial reporting, do we need to complete this 90 days after we receive the award or 90 days after the first anniversary date? That should be after the first anniversary date. Yeah, so if you just received your award starting in September 2016, there shouldn't be anything. The first financial report you're going to have is going to be February 1st of this year, I believe. Though I might need to double check that to make sure that you need to fill that out for this year. But for the SF425, that won't be due for you until next September, 90 days after, in next fall. Chrissy's asking if it's an administrative point of contact. Chrissy, let me know if you're still looking for clarification on that. Can you survey participants after the project period but before the final report is due, or do you need to survey participants during the project period? I think that you're probably referring to the indicators of success there. I will assume, so that's how I'll answer it. It's okay to survey them after the project period. Ideally, with the indicators of success, we're trying to report data on the fiscal year, which goes from October 1st to September 30th. However, I recognize that for projects that are doing, really working on the growing season, doing a survey before September 30th doesn't necessarily make sense. And so That's why each year the data for indicators of success isn't due until January. So there's time for people to sort of wrap up the growing season and wrap up that information and send it to me, you know, potentially after the end of that project period. So there is a little bit of flexibility there. We do try to keep it as close to possible to that project period.
And if I can quickly jump in just back to that financial reporting question. So in terms of the SF 425, that is due annually within 90 days of the project start date anniversary. In terms of the requirements for submitting financial reports in the REEport system, that is due annually by February 1st of the fiscal year following the fiscal year of expenditures being reported. So according to that, my understanding is that your first financial report due in the REEport system, if you were awarded a grant starting September 2016, would not be due until 2018.
Someone's asking if the presentation will be made available. Yes, we're happy to send a link to the presentation when we send out an email afterwards. Do planning grants follow the same reporting structure? Yes, so typically planning grants are only a year. So in terms of the REEport system, I believe rather than an annual progress report, you would just do one final report on the same structure. The indicators of success report, we ideally would like planning projects to fill it out. There's significantly less for them to do. There's not typically a beneficiary component because that's not typically relevant to them. And the survey is designed in such a way that there are many questions that will not be shown to you if you're not growing food, if you're not selling food or anything like that. You're not going to need to answer those detailed questions. So if you're doing a planning project, it really is pretty simple to fill the indicators of success out. So we appreciate that you do that. Someone's asking if we need to make unforeseen changes, do we need to report? I'm guessing that you're talking about in terms of major changes to your, or unforeseen changes to your grant process, and that would be something that you would do through REEport rather than through indicators of success. My understanding is that any changes that you definitely do want to report them, and that you want to make sure that you're in contact with Jane Clary if it's programmatic change or any large budgetary changes or financial changes. You want to be in touch with the awards management division before you make the changes. Renee, it depends on the nature of the change. There are some changes that require prior approval, such as changing key personnel, changing project director. I apologize, the rest are not coming to mind immediately. There are some changes that you are able to make. For example, a no-cost extension. If it's the first time, you don't need to notify them prior to the change. You do just need to let them know that it's happening. That's not something that requires prior approval. That, though, should also be in the terms and conditions, and I can try to find that more specifically and send that out afterwards, since the rest are not coming to mind immediately. Can staff time and evaluator time spent on the project during the period after 8/29/2019 up to when you submit the final report in December 2019 be reimbursable by the grant? No, my understanding is that all expenses need to be incurred prior to the grant award, the expiration date. So I'm assuming in this situation that your grant expires August 29th, 2019. So all billable time to the grant needs to be incurred prior to that date. You do have up to 90 days after that to spend down the money in your account, but all receipts and everything needs to be prior to that August 29th date. So if there are more questions, please feel free to send them in to the chat. We're happy to answer more questions. And I will also type in our email addresses for both Kristen and myself, so that if you need to contact us, I'll send those in the email as well. So it doesn't look like there are any more questions coming in, unless any come in the next minute or so. We might wrap up here. So I wanted to say thank you to all of you. I hope that this was helpful for you to get a better understanding of what the requirements are. And again, just to reiterate, so since indicators of success is something that we are managing and we are administering, if you want to talk specifically with us about how to fit it into your project, if you have particular situations, if you already have a long-standing way that you evaluate the participants in your project and you want to talk about how to integrate our questions, we're more than happy to talk with you about that, as well as just generally working on the project. And then the REEport system, we're happy to try to answer your questions, but ultimately that probably does need to go to the USDA. But again, please feel free to reach out with any questions, and we're happy to help as we're able to. So thank you all, and I will send a follow-up email with resources, and please let us know if any other questions come up.